Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Peter Jennings, and I go by CSURAM88 across the daily fantasy industry. And pumped to be back again here at FantasyLabs doing another model preview. It's week 9 already, which is crazy, and decided to preview the wide receiver position. It is a tough position this week with a lot of options, and with roster construction leading to spending on expensive running backs in a lot of spots and cash games. Certainly think it makes sense to identify some value at the wide receiver position. In addition to that, the expensive guys are going to be good tournament leverage plays, given that most people will probably end up spending at running back. So let's take a look here at how I designed the model here at Fantasy Labs. I made a little bit more of a cash game type model. It has a pretty good plus minus, not over 4 points like some of the models, but it has a lot of the key parts I always include, and does bake in a couple things I think are nice for cash games. So I have Vegas score at 10 points. I think this is always important, is taking a look at the totals. One other thing, if you're on this page, it is a free page that we have here at Fantasy Labs, is our Vegas page. Take a look at that. It does show line movements and a lot of relevant Vegas information that you should be paying attention to. That's the business is for them, is predicting outcomes and how many points are going to be scored, and that is absolutely relevant and applicable for daily fantasy. I have opponent rating at 20. You can mess around and actually weight this more and more heavily in all your models at all positions as we get more data. Something that I talk about a lot. It's very important, and it's a great way that we basically take a look at the matchup here using some proprietary statistics here at Fantasy Labs. So I think it's predictive, and I think it's really helpful to look at, and a lot of the guys rating well in this particular model are doing that because they have a good matchup. We have projected points per dollar, so we have projections here, and just real quick, I'll sort by the raw projections. You can take a look here and see who's rating out as the top overall projections on the slate. I'm recording this Thursday morning. There are going to be a lot of changes to these projections as news comes in. And I think that's something that's really critical, is always having changing projections based on the news and everything that we learn throughout the week based on injuries and practice reports and all that good stuff. So pay attention to how these change, and you can always sort by any of these columns. So going back to switching it here by rating, I also have projected plus minus, which is one of the big key Fantasy Lab stats. Again, it's proprietary. Takes into account the salary, which is why you're seeing in this model a lot of cheap guys rated pretty highly. And then farther down, I did market share at 5%. And this is something I think is really cool, and you can actually look at the market share of these players. So you can see here the percentage of targets that they've had over the last 12 months, the percentage of TDs, the receiving yards, etc. And it's all broken down based on their percentage of the market share for the receiver position. So I think this is really cool, and something that I'm always looking to take advantage of. So this is a model, again, that's more designed towards cash game. I have my 3 main sliders, opponent rating, projected points per dollar, and projected plus minus as the bulk of the model, even more so than normal. And that's to really get a cash game lineup I feel great about. So one thing, too, is with these projections, if you do want to change them, if you're making a lot of different lineups, you can do that here as well. So let's take a look here and talk about some of these receivers. Mohamed Sanu coming off a really nice game. Green Bay decided to double team Julio Jones, and that led to a monster game from Mohamed Sanu. I do think that Atlanta's going to have success throwing the ball. I think it's much tougher to run against Tampa Bay with Gerald McCoy healthy than it is to pass against them. So I think Mohamed Sanu is in another good spot. We'll be curious to see how Julio looks. He did tweak his ankle, and there's concerns about his knee after last game. He is good to go, from what I understand, for the Thursday game. But Sanu certainly makes sense. And again, I'm doing all the games here just to help you guys out with all the slates. You can sort by slates right here, and you see we have all the DraftKings slates. So something that I find really helpful in playing different slates and whatnot is leveraging that. Tavon Austin, number 2. Oh, man, I don't know what to do with Tavon Austin. He had a great game last week, relatively, I guess. 15 targets, 10 receptions, and a touchdown. If you look through, I don't know how this guy does so poorly with all the volume he's getting in targets. And if you want to see why he's rating so well in this particular model, again, let's go to the market share. He's getting 21.7% of the targets. It's 25% of the touchdowns over the last 12 months for this team. So at the position. So I think it makes sense that he's rating well. But we've seen Tavon Austin have a ton of bad games. This is a good spot, though, against Carolina's really weak secondary. So I will be buying some Tavon Austin, but not too much. I don't want to do too crazy on Tavon. He's one of my favorite players. I've been talking about him for years. He was fantastic in college, but his lack of size is hurting him in the vertical passing game, and teams know to stack the box to stop Gurley and to stop the short passing game with Tavon Austin against the Rams. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, he's rating really high, and I would not have too much Tavon Austin. Even though I think he could have a really nice game here, I will have some, but not too much. Jarvis Landry, one of my favorite plays going against the Jets. We have him rated really well in this particular model. We also have him projected to be owned really heavily. And again, that's something I want to point out that I think is so critical here. We have projected ownership from Adam Levitan, who I think is one of the sharpest minds in the entire industry, especially when it comes to football. And he's really looking at this stuff. In addition to that, our whole staff is evaluating this. I'm making comments, and this is a great way to kind of leverage who might be good plays in tournaments based on their ownership, and identifying some guys who might be good chalky cash game plays. If they're projected to have high ownership, that probably means they're a good play. So I think Jarvis Landry will end up being pretty heavily owned. We have him between 17 and 20% right now, and I certainly think that makes a lot of sense going against the Jets in this really juicy matchup. So let's start back again here by rating. Devante Parker right behind him in this model. Makes sense. Same matchup against the Jets. A little more expensive than I would like for Devante Parker. Hasn't seen a ton of targets since that New England Patriots game, but there's a lot of upside lurking with Devante Parker, and he makes more sense as a tournament play to me. Jermaine Kearse, I'm not going to talk too much about him. I'm not really on that spot. If I'm going to buy the Seattle passing game, it's going to be Jimmy Graham. And it's going to be Doug Baldwin in this spot. I do know that he's getting more targets, but I think that there's a little bit safer value here. I mean, he hasn't gone double digits in 6 games. Maybe it's something to pay attention to here with the model, but he's rating a little too high for me. So you see here only 2 pro trends. This would actually be someone I'd probably take out in a lot of spots. And then I have Dorial GreenBeckham rated as the next receiver here. I think he's certainly interesting. Definitely think there's a lot of upside with him long term. Saw him 9 targets last week and much more involved. He is cheap in the matchup against the Giants. I think there's some merit to throwing Dorial GreenBeckham in some tournaments. This is a highly rated player coming out of high school who just had off the field issues, and I guess he's kind of a clown in a lot of regards, but maybe he's figuring it out in Philadelphia, and it certainly makes sense with Wentz and Dorial GreenBeckham to connect long term. There could be a lot of upside with him down the stretch of the season. T.Y. Hilton coming in next. Pay attention to his injury and what's going on with him. You can see here again one cool thing with messing around with the FantasyLabs and the models is you can actually see the news. So we have him right here. He's still in the models, but as you can see here, he finished he came back in the game, but he had a hamstring injury that clearly hobbled him. And set up practice, so pay attention to him. It's not definitive if he'll play or not. It looks like we have him as unsure if he'll play, so definitely monitor that. But a great thing to leverage here within the models as well. Speaking of LA receivers, when we were talking about Tavon Austin, I really do like Kenny Britt. Look at all the targets. He has touchdown upside, big play upside. Much more likely to take him at a similar price tag versus Tavon Austin. I like him quite a bit. On Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders in the spot against Oakland, I think that makes sense. Love Tyrell the Gazelle against Tennessee. They're actually pretty good against the run as well. I think if you're going to attack them, you want to do it through the air. Obviously, it's hard to do well against the Broncos, so it made sense that he struggled last week. I think you can get him at a better ownership percentage now because of that, and I love Tyrell the Gazelle. Talked about Doug Baldwin. I think he's in play. Make sure to follow Ty Montgomery as well. If he's healthy, I really like him. But again, the sickle cell is certainly bothering him, and he was held out, which is the big news last week. I had to pivot all over. I had 61% Ty Montgomery in tournaments before the news broke, and that was quite the mess editing on DraftKings. Jordan Matthews, interesting. We'll see. I like Mike Wallace in this spot if Steve Smith's out. A lot of targets and a lot of upside for Mike Wallace here. We'll see what ends up happening there. I do like Emmanuel Sanders. I love Michael Thomas, who I think is one of the best rookies in the league. I really think he's in a good spot here against San Francisco. The game should play up in pace because of the way the 49ers play, and the Saints should be throwing a lot. Torrey Smith here, right behind him in that same game. We'll see what happens there. There's a lot of speculation he would be traded. He didn't. I do like San Francisco coming off the bye. Colin Kaepernick is interesting. Randall Cobb, pay attention to his injury. Dante Moncrief, this is one of my favorite plays on the week. As you can see here, we have projected at 26 to 30% owned. Right there with Antonio Brown as the highest owned guy. I think he makes an exceptional play this week, and someone I'll have a ton of exposure to with Andrew Luck. Pay attention to the T.Y. Hilton news, too. He will get more targets if he's out. With tournaments, I kind of hope Hilton plays. The Moncrief doesn't draw too much attention, but injury I'm certainly monitoring. I love Antonio Brown. Stephon Diggs against Detroit is another guy who's in a really good spot. Sterling Shepard is a rookie that I liked a lot in the beginning of the year that could go really under-owned this week, 0 to 1% they have him at. I think that he's not a great play, but there's definitely upside here with Sterling Shepard. Showed a lot of double-digit potential in the beginning of the year, and it's really been fading. So I think there might be a little bit of a buy low. Maybe it's the following week or later down the season, but I do like him. Jeremy Curley showing up. Kenny Stills I like for tournaments. Don't mind the Dallas receiving game if you're going to fade Ezekiel Elliott in tournaments, who's probably my favorite play overall in the week. I think it makes sense to get some leverage and go the passing game, maybe throw out a Dak Dez team for some leverage. And just kind of scrolling through here, I do like Kelvin Benjamin a lot. He's rating low. I think our projection for him should go up, so I see that. I do think there's a lot of opportunity for him in this spot going up against LA. I really like that. And that kind of finishes it out here, guys. You can see here there's some other names, Odell Beckham, Julio Jones. I think they're obviously always in play. They're not rating quite as well because their projections aren't super high. But we'll see. We'll see how things change throughout the week. I really hope this was helpful for you guys. Again, I'm doing a lot of different things here. It's Thursday. My opinion could change. And again, with all the content that I do, guys, this is my opinion. It doesn't necessarily reflect everything that I'm going to put into my lineups, but it is my opinion. Things do change, but I'll try to keep you guys updated. I'll also have a Periscope if you watch this on Thursday night. And as always, looking to see more Fantasy Labs subscribers at the top of the leaderboard.